Welcome to the Coptimizer Podcast, a platform dedicated to uncuffing your true potential in public safety. We're here to provide you with valuable tips and insights that will help you optimize your life and career. I'm Retired Chief Patrick Flannelly, and I'm honored to be your guide and coach on this journey. Here, I'll share the latest insights and strategies to help you survive and thrive in the demanding world of public safety. Our noble duty is to protect and serve. We embody the role of peacemakers in our communities. However, this profession's immense physical and mental demands come with a price. If we fail to take a proactive approach for our well-being and lead ourselves first, then the stress from the job can and will lead to poor health outcomes. We have all seen it play out. Not only does this impact our professional and personal lives, but it also affects our ability to fulfill this sacred duty. Like many of you, my journey has been filled with tremendous challenges, with highs and lows. However, through creativity, experience, and a positive attitude, I successfully managed over 30 years in law enforcement, emerging healthy and happy. Now, I am driven to share what I've learned to show you that the path is not all doom and gloom. There is hope and a profound purpose in serving your community, and I'm here to show you that it does not have to come at the cost of your health and well-being. Join us as we explore cutting-edge research, interview top experts, and share inspiring stories of transformation. Whether on duty or off, it's time to optimize your potential and live your best life. Get ready to be inspired, informed, and empowered. This is the Coptimizer Podcast. Good afternoon, everybody. Well, it might not be afternoon. It could be morning, could be evening, depending on when you choose to listen to this. But Retired Chief Pat Flannelly here with another episode of the Coptimizer Podcast. I've got an old friend on today, Chief of Police, now retired, Gary Woodruff. Gary is down in the Indianapolis metropolitan area, and I'm going to let him talk about his background here in just a second. But I'm excited to have this conversation. We're gonna talk a little bit about Gary's career, his career arc, leadership philosophy, but really we're gonna dive into the wellness stuff and how do you prepare for retirement? What are some of the unexpected things that happen? And generally just have some good conversations that won't involve being mic'd up when you go into the restroom and forget to turn the mic off.
Not that either one of us have ever done that.
No, never, never. And I know there's a lot of officers that have done that with their body cameras. Matter of fact, in our agency, we had signs up on the bathroom door and inside and above the urinals and stuff that said, "Have you have you turned your body camera off?"
Have you turned your body cam off? And we had the body worn cameras that had the officer down feature. So if somebody took off their vest, their external vest, laid the vest down. After a few seconds, it would give out the alert, officer down,
Officer
disregard,
down in the shitter.
officer down to the bathroom, disregard on that. It's all good.
All right, Gary, thanks for being here. Appreciate you spending some of your valuable time with us. Can you go ahead and introduce yourself and tell the Captimizer audience who you are?
Well, it's an honor to be here with you, Chief, and we've known each other for a very, very long time. And so I'm retired as of January 2024 from the Lawrence, Indiana Police Department. Lawrence is an Indianapolis suburb. We're kind of to the northeast corner or section of Marion County here, Indianapolis/Marion County. And a lot of people recognize us. We were a featured police department on the TV show on A&E network called Live PD. We were on there in 2018, 2019, and then early 2020, just before the pandemic hit. And we were on for 98 episodes. Very popular agency on that TV show, and it was quite
Yeah,
a
we might have to dive into a couple of those, by the
yeah. I'm
way.
all about it, man. It's interesting. It was a very interesting period. We had a positive experience, but anyway, if we want to talk about that later, we certainly can. But anyway, spent 40 years total in law enforcement. Joined the U.S. Army Military Police right out of high school, and at age 18, Fort McClellan, Alabama was basic training, and then Army MP school. I was stationed overseas in Europe, and then when I exited the military, after my initial 3-year commitment, I joined the Frankfurt Police Department up there close to home for you.
Yep.
And I was definitely a legacy hire there. My dad was served 20 years at that department. A little side note there, the uniform that I wore on my first day there at Frankfurt PD was the same uniform he wore on his last day
Oh, that's cool.
at the police department. Now he ascended to be the two-term chief there, and yeah, obviously my badge said patrol officer on it, but nonetheless, it was the same uniform. I wore that uniform once and put it away. But yeah, I had a good career there at Frankfurt PD, 14 years. I was always more interested in the investigation side of the house, the plainclothes detective side of the house. The uniform side never really sung to my soul necessarily. And, uh, and then in 2000, transferred down to Lawrence, down to Lawrence PD, and I never looked back. It was one of the best career moves that I could have made. I enjoyed my time at Frankfurt, but that time it ran its course. Won't get too deep into that, but in the year 2000, 13 of us left a 31 member agency. 13 of us left in the first 6 months. So clearly there were some issues that were occurring there. So we all had our reasons for going, and it is what it is. But Lawrence PD was a great place to work. I grew up down in that area, down in the Indianapolis area. And for those familiar with Indianapolis, I was the East Sider for most of my childhood, past sixth grade. So, through junior high and high school.
Where'd you go to high school?
Yeah, Arlington High School, Golden Knights.
Oh, Arlington. Okay, so not like Lawrence Central or
Yeah, no, where I lived at the 38th and Franklin area was IPS, Indianapolis Public Schools. So I went to school 51 downtown Indianapolis. That was during the times of desegregation, believe it or not. Yeah, I'm that old. And IPS schools will still be desegregated then. So from the east side, we were bused downtown, and then attended Arlington High School. It was a great education in life, as well as the traditional high school education, and then joined the Army right out of high school, and pursued my career from there. I'm one of those people. I knew what I wanted to do when I was 9 years old. Um, my dad graduated from the FBI Academy in Quantico when I was 9. I went out there for his graduation, and I will have to admit that the hook was set as if it wasn't already. The hook was set, and to his great credit, he tried to talk me out of going into this profession, and not that it wasn't honorable. He had a great career, but he knew what both of us know now, what we all know now, that when you have some tenure on a police department, that there are some challenges that come along with it, and that's part of the conversation. So yeah, it's kind of an encapsulation. At Lawrence PD, I went into detectives pretty quickly, then rose up through the ranks, sergeant, deputy chief, and then had the great privilege of being appointed the chief in January of 22, and stayed there until I closed in on retirement in late 23. Stepped aside, handed it over to the next generation of leadership, and then went into retirement. So it was an honor to serve all those years, and I'm sure you feel the same way. Lots of lessons learned there.
Yeah, the days are long, but the years go quick, right?
Went by like that, it seemed like, and just literally the blink of an eye. You were a young person thinking you were going to save the world, and you just had some incredible opportunity. Worked with some just spectacular people. And you could never give enough credit to the great coworkers that you had the privilege of working with over the years, and giving credit where credit is due. Stood on the shoulders of giants for sure, and had some great colleagues like you, and a great many other chiefs and deputy chiefs and public information officers large part of my career, I served as a PIO for at both Frankfurt and at Lawrence, and always a privilege and an honor to be able to represent your agency in public like that and really shape your agency's legacy and your agency's brand, your agency's image, and the professionalism that we know goes along with that.
Well, you said something that I think that caught my attention in that your dad may have tried to steer you away from a police profession, which, when I teach this wellness class in Indiana for the new chiefs every year, and that was one of the questions that I started asking all the way back in like 2014, 2015 timeframe, right, like right around that Ferguson and post Ferguson era. We had already started to see a dip in the number of applications that we were getting, and people often associate the George Floyd as that pinnacle moment where policing really kind of hit this problem where we were not getting the recruits. But I mean, I think those of us that were paying attention saw that trend start, close to a decade before that. The number of applications were already there. The type of applicants, I don't like to say like quality of applicants because we generally held around a 90 to 93% washout rate, depending on the group. Not me, just because someone might have got washed out of the process doesn't mean that they weren't a viable or a good candidate. It just might have meant that, well, for the openings that we have and the candidate pool that we have, there might be one candidate that we think has a better chance of success than you. And it's an art as much as it is a science. But I started asking that question because people were complaining about, hey, we're not getting the apps. We used to get hundreds of applications for every opening. Now we're only getting, dozens. And then now we're like, shoot, we're lucky to get at. Like sometimes we have more openings than we have applications, which is, that's a huge problem. Um, I think, for those of us that are in the profession, like ask that question, like how many of you, so you might have 40, 50 chiefs in that room, at the beginning of each year, right? And it would be the question was, how many of you are advocating for your own son or daughter to move into policing? And like no hands were going up. And so I asked the question, how many of you are advocating for them to do anything but policing? And then almost every hand goes up. And I don't necessarily think it's because we don't want good people in the profession, but you do know how challenging it is. And by the time you've reached the chief's chair, you've seen a lot, you've experienced a lot. And, to ask, someone that you love to go through the same things, yeah, that's, you know what they're getting into. So it's a lot of mixed emotion, right? Like you want a good legacy, you want good people to come in, but at the same time, it's just like, let someone else take a shot at this.
Well,
Let
I
my
will
son
say
go be an
this.
engineer.
Yeah, right, right. So I will say this for my own situation, my own experience. My dad had a 20-year career, two-term chief. I went into private business for a time, did very well for himself, and then came back and was the mayor of Frankfurt for two terms from 92 to 2000. And that was a boyhood dream of his. And it was an honor to be, at his side to support him through that, to be with him through that great run. But his motivation was his statement to me at 17 years old. He was making his last ditch effort. It wasn't that he was trying to talk me out of the profession. He was giving me all of the information that I needed to make an informed decision, and I always appreciated that. His statement to me was, and at 17, you have no clue about this because you have no experience. But his statement to me was, it's not the threat you'll face from the outside, it's the threat you'll face from within. And
Well, that's
wow,
very insightful.
yeah, how prophetic, how insightful. And of course, at 17, you have no point of reference as to what he was talking about. And I wanted to blaze my own path. A lot of people would frequently ask, following in your dad's footsteps. Yeah, no way. Those footsteps are too big. I'm going to blaze my own path and make my own mistakes. I made my fair share, that's for sure. But you learn from them and you apply those the next time so they don't happen again. But that was the context behind those conversations. It's not that he didn't want me to necessarily go into the profession. He just wanted me have to make as informed decision as I could make, given the experience level or the lack thereof that you have at 17 years old, right?
Yeah. Go in with your eyes wide open, right?
Yeah, and it's easy to romanticize it. You hear the stories around the dinner table. Police officers talk about the positive things, the positive impacts, and he had a lot to talk about. Very rarely do they recount the negative aspects of it.
Oh, yes,
So,
they do.
well, true,
They
but
just do that inside the police department.
well, that's fact. Yeah, that's very accurate. But around the dinner table with your kids and your family in that period anyway, those negative aspects weren't talked about. And boy, there's a segue into the wellness part, and at least a big part of the wellness piece and what's changed over the years during our career arc, certainly. But yeah, it was, obviously he was proud, to follow in the footsteps, so to speak, even though I was intent on blazing my own path. Still, I felt like I grew up around the profession. I have a great picture. I can send it to you if you'd like, that of me at 4 years old sitting there with my dad at his desk. And he always kept a shoe shine kit underneath his desk, a little wooden box. And when I was appointed chief, I put that shoe shine kit underneath my desk. And that was very meaningful. Sorry.
No,
That
no,
was,
man. I
yeah.
like, dude, like I'm getting choked up just listening to you. It's like, you start, I lost my dad 6 years ago, almost
Yeah.
6 years ago to the week. And um yeah, I I those remarks really resonate with me. Like the footsteps are too big, so you don't, my dad
Yeah.
was a Korean War vet. Matter of fact, that flag that sits behind me is that was that flag from his casket at his funeral with his Bronze Star from Korea sitting on it.
Nice.
And
Nice.
yeah, I it's but that's pretty unique, having like to, someday it's so cool. Like your first day you wore his uniform uh, when he was a chief, and then you got to ascend to that same rank, different police department, but same
Sure.
responsibility. And that's kind of unique. Like you would have your own dad to, because being chief it can be a very lonely position. And um, chiefs catch a lot of arrows, and that just comes with the job. But having someone that close to you that maybe where you could learn some of those life lessons, that's
Oh, certainly. Certainly. And
you
the,
had you had a leg up, man.
well, yeah, I'd like to think so. And certainly it was important for me to carry that legacy forward. Yeah, it's certain on a different police department, but nonetheless, it's a family legacy, family business, if you will. And, always did my best to honor the family name. But at the same time, blazing my own path, making my own mistakes, owning those mistakes and sharing, being willing to share those and move forward from them. I too have the great privilege of teaching leadership at the new chief school every year. For those listeners not from Indiana, every new chief in the state of Indiana has to go through a week-long chief executives training session at the Indiana Law Enforcement Academy. And I enjoyed my time when I went through. It was there were some boring segments, but there were some brilliant segments also. And if nothing else, you network with your fellow chiefs and you make friends, and you have each other to lean on, and you have that little chiefs network, kind of like we had an investigations and detectives network. That when you had questions, you could certainly rely on your network to help guide you through. And I certainly relied on that chiefs network that I had at my disposal to help out. There's nothing like learning from those who have been there and done that, like you and a great many others.
You know, um, and I wish we could make that school a lot longer. I wish we could make it a 3 or 4 week course, and maybe we can work on that in the future, because it's that you're already in the chair when you go to that school. And you're kind of figuring out, like, we all have our ideas about what we think it's going to be like when you're a
Yeah.
chief. And then,
Yeah.
like, oh, when I'm, someday, you go all the way back to your squad car days, right? When you're sitting there, car to
Absolutely.
car conversation, talking about how you're going to fix this place someday if I ever get the chance. And
Two
then you get
o'clock.
in the chair and you're
Yeah.
like, oh, okay. My
2 o'clock
perspective's
in the
different
morning,
now.
sitting there side by side with your beat partner,
Yeah.
your chef mate. You're talking about, man, when I get to be chief, I'm going to do this, 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 and this. We're solving the world's problems sitting right there in those two cars at 2 a.m. in the local park or wherever it is you're at. And
Yeah.
as a matter of fact, that's one of the first things I challenge new chiefs with is hey, guess what? It's your turn. It's our turn.
Yeah.
All those times you said, if I ever had the opportunity, I
Yeah.
would do
And
X, Y, and
and
Z.
and
Well,
remember that you begged to be in that chair.
yeah,
It's
it's
not it's not like someone drug your ass into that office and put you there and said, "Here, be the chief."
yeah, it's your turn, and it's a great privilege.
It
Pressure
is.
is a privilege. It's a great privilege to serve as the chief of the agency, but to whom much is given, much is expected. And I've seen chiefs. I'm sure you have too throughout your career arc that they get into the chief's office and they put their feet up, and it's either I've made it or and I don't have to do anything else, or they view it in what I would consider to be respectfully very inappropriately, or they let that power, they let the lust of power overtake their why they need to serve their department and the citizens that they serve, that they truly serve. I like to say
Yeah,
at the chief school, we serve at the pleasure of our appointing person for most chiefs in the state of Indiana. That's our mayor.
yeah.
But ultimately, we serve our agency, our people, and have the greater good as far as the community is concerned. That's who we really serve, in my respectful opinion.
Oh, absolutely. And that, for those listening who are not from Indiana, I mean, that's generally your sheriffs are elected, 92 counties in
Yeah,
Indiana. But police chiefs are generally appointed through an elected mayor. So it's a political appointment. Which is one of the reasons why that class is always full, because
right.
there's always turnover, right? And new mayor, new chief, oftentimes that's not always the case, but that's generally the way that it works. So, that's the one question that every chief needs to be prepared to answer, right? Is like, what? Because you always go, hey, what's it like to be a chief? Well, it's like one day away from being whatever your merited rank position was before you got appointed to the
Yeah,
chief's office. But I was lucky. I'm very fortunate. People think I just say this stuff, but my boss was my first night shift commander and
yeah,
my first SWAT commander. He became a city councilman, then mayor, Tony Rosworski here in Lafayette, and then Don Roush was, he was the chief for 9 years before I was appointed chief. So he was a great leader and was very very leadership oriented. He was also an officer in the army, so it was, I mean,
yeah,
it was you know there's always, the thing about police departments, you're never done, right? There's always things to do,
yeah.
and and a lot of projects just take time. So it's just like you have to you have to build on what your predecessors accomplished, and you're going to leave stuff undone for whoever's coming next. And the one thing you just don't want to do is fuck it up too bad, like, I'm
Well,
trying to
yeah,
mess
that's
it up. I
true.
don't generally cuss, but on this podcast I should say. But
Well, that's very true, and something I always share with the new chiefs, and I believe it to my core, is, and I've seen it just the opposite. A lot of our life's lessons we learned by watching people do it well, and by maybe more importantly by watching people not do it well.
sure.
But accept the appointed position, knowing it's not yours. It's going to be finite, whether it's ended for you or whether you end it yourself. It's going to be finite. The difference is what you do with it while you have it, however long or short that is. And yeah, you go into it hoping you're gonna have the privilege of that position for a good tenure. But the bottom line is, it's not yours to keep. I was adamant that at our new police station that we built in 2019, those of us who had the privilege of having offices, They wanted to put our names on the offices. I did not want my name on my office. It wasn't my office. I had the privilege of occupying it for that period. I was deputy chief during that time. I just wanted the office door to say deputy chief of police. Um, I was overridden in that when I was appointed chief. I told our office manager, I do not want my name on the door. This is the office of the chief of police. This is not my office. I have the privilege of occupying it right now. And well, she overrode me as she was empowered to do, and put my name on it. And it was an honor to see that. But you understand the point.
Right.
That was my way of staying humble. And what are my ways of staying humble? I had a great many of them. And understanding that it's not my office, it's the chief's office. I have the privilege of occupying it in that moment. Now, it doesn't mean you abdicate responsibility. I always say, I'm sure you share the same philosophy. If things go well, the credit goes to our officers in the field, detectives, the people that are doing the work every day. Credit goes to them. When things don't go well, I take the responsibility. I'm the chief. It's my responsibility. And to me, that's the way it has to work. And, you've had the good fortune of seeing that modeled in good chiefs, good mayors. So did I. The mayor I had for my last 8 years was fantastic. Couldn't have asked for any better. He supported the police department, but he didn't try to interfere or micromanage. But we knew he had our backs, and what more can you ask for? And he's a genuinely good dude.
Well, we don't
So
police in a vacuum, right? I mean, you just
right,
like it, and that, sometimes that can when you don't have the right perspective, it can be frustrating. When you're working the street, you're a line officer, you just everything has its time and its place, and it takes a lot to manage and run a city, and the budget is not infinite.
right.
It's finite. So back to those squad car conversations, right? There's not a lot of problems that you can't solve if you've got enough money to throw at it. Not every problem, but there's you got enough cash in the bank, then you can get a lot of stuff done. But you
Well,
also have to have a lot of community support as well. So
yeah, yeah, absolutely, and that's key, isn't it? And that's in my mind. That's one of the key aspects of being the chief is investing in that community support, investing in those relationships. Certainly helped that I was from that area. I ran those streets that we were working in, and had a lot of those relationships built all the way back to being a kid running those streets, and that certainly helped, whether it was in Frankfurt or whether it was in the far east side of Indianapolis. And people would ask, especially in Lawrence, there, well, what do you know about it? Where'd you grow up at? Yeah, right over here, 38th and Franklin. I played basketball at this very basketball court. I ran these very streets, and so yeah, I grew up here too. So I get it. I understand it. I understand the challenges, and it gives you a lot of credibility, whether you're a uniform patrol officer or whether you're a detective or whether you're deputy chief or the chief. But yeah, investing in those relationships and those community relationships, helping educate people about the profession. I think that goes a long way. It goes a long way towards building that community support. I also think back to one of your topics you were talking about earlier, the recruitment, retention. Having those officers come on, we would have 400 or 500 applications to get on a list. We might not even had any openings. We would have 400 to 500 applications just to get on a 2-year wait list. This would have been in the 2010s, 20 teens, and I like to think we were a destination department through some of that. We had the best of both worlds. Urban style policing, the activity that goes along with that. But we were small enough that everybody knew everybody, and we kind of had the best of both worlds, a smaller agency within a major municipality. And we were busy. I always said that we got more done with less than any agency that I ever knew of. And the time we'd hover somewhere between 50 to low 60s number of sworn personnel, 115 total under roof between sworn personnel, reserve, civilians, and we had our budget was about $10 million, and about four of that went to pay people. The rest of that we operated the police department out of that. So it was quite a challenge. Some of those financial restrictions that were there certainly. We did some creative ways through grant management, through grant funding, through other ways of community support. We started a foundation. and accepted donations. We're able to leverage some of those resources to help benefit our officers. And
That I wasn't going to bring this up, but now I feel compelled to because I get into this, I get into this conversation a lot with my friends outside of policing and others like, and there was just Police One just had another article out. They were talking about shifts, 8 hours, 10 hours, 12 hours. And we can use this as a good segue to go right into, officer safety, officer wellness, and what that means, not just only when you're working, but what it means going into post-retirement. And, you know, the budget, the budget drives the decision making for what shifts that you're going to work primarily,
yeah,
because so you had the budget and then you have your calls for service, and so there is a demand on your police department that has to be met, right? And then every community, it might look a little bit different, like what the standards are for response, what your police department does, what they don't do. And 18,000 police departments, it can be highly individualistic. There are some core elements to policing that don't change, but 90 to 94% of police chiefs' budget is fixed. It means on
yeah,
your personnel cost and your operating costs, things that you don't have any discretion over this spending. It's just done, like healthcare, all the benefits and everything that come. And so now you're left with this, if your budget is 10 million, you're left with, maybe $1 million where you've got some discretion over, but you still got to buy cars and you got to buy gas and you got to buy bullets and you got to buy guns, and those things are not
indeed.
always in your other. So now a big part of that, what seems to be discretionary, really isn't. Like it's on cost, like mandatory costs. So
Yeah,
what then happens, right? And now we've got to get creative and to be able to get the equipment that we need, add manpower. So, like, in this whole depolicing era and defund the police, I- it, you know, oh, we're going to create these community service officers to run and handle calls so we can alleviate having the police department to do that. And like, it's just another, like, that's essentially a form of defunding the police, particularly if you remove that from the police department's budget to then go hire those people and go out and do that job.
right.
Which, we could talk about that just all day long. And I'm a firm believer in the concept. I have some very, and Mike Dekoff and I had a conversation about this. He's chief from Bloomington, Indiana, who has
Sure.
a very, very good program at his agency. But in the end, you have this, like, this balance that you're always trying to reach, and and not every police department is the same. And the balance is, like, how do we, number one, how do we meet the demands and expectations of our community? That's it. That's the most
Yeah,
important thing. Community safety. Like, are we successful or not? And so we could talk about, well, how do you define what's the metric for success in a police department? Because if your metric for success is your crime rate, then you better give the police an unlimited budget on how they want to attack that, or you're unfairly going to judge them based on a standard by which they'll never be able to meet, right?
right, right.
Police departments certainly have impact on community safety and community wellness, but it's only one piece of a much larger puzzle. And when it comes to shifts, um, you know, yeah, and I'll say this from a chief's perspective because, as when I was a lieutenant, I went to uh, it was a 4-day school for it was an allocation study school, and then a couple years later, I wound up going through a very similar program through Northwestern Staff and Command. And what I'm talking about there is, um, you know, how many police officers do you need in order to meet the expectation and demand of community safety for your community? That's a short way. We could talk for days about this, right? But
Right.
short way of putting it. And so, with that, there's some algorithms that have been created, and you can kind of plug and play based on, calls for service, the number of police officers that you have, number of detectives that you have, and you can kind of create this formula for, how many you think you need or what's the ideal amount. But then you're limited there by what your budget tells you can do.
Yeah,
So oftentimes, like some frustration, like police, the 10-hour shift. Studies have shown that's probably from a wellness perspective, it's the ideal schedule. Or I can't say ideal, it's better than eights and 12s. But from an operational perspective, it's the most difficult to staff. It's also the most expensive to staff. So
yeah,
it's because you need about 30% more manpower. And if you're a chief and you have a group of officers that wants the 10-hour shifts, but you don't have the budget and you can't get there, and your community is not going to increase your budget by, you're not going to go from 10 million to 13 million. Maybe you could, but that means the city is going to have to, you're going to have to cut from someplace else in order
yeah.
to put it there. So it's just a complex way of just kind of thinking about, like, this is what a chief is trying to manage, and he's trying to manage the best he or she can with what they have, and that might not always meet the expectations for what the line wants, and it might not also meet the expectations for what the community wants. So you wind up in a very interesting position.
Well, that's part of welcome to the chief's office, right?
And I go back, like,
Yeah,
remember, you begged for the job. No one
yeah.
drug you in here and said, do it.
Yeah, I would share that with every chief. It was my opening line. As a matter of fact, at the new chief school, welcome to the chief's office.
Yeah.
Here's what you can expect. But yeah, there are some challenges there, but within those challenges come opportunities, and again, pressure is a privilege. I was always taught and had learned over the years that as a deputy chief and then as the chief that you can set your priorities through your budget, and you can let your people know what your priorities are as chief through managing that budget. And yeah, the budget is finite. I can tell you in Lawrence, in general numbers, we had 24 million coming in as tax revenue to operate the city as overall. 20 of that went to public safety, 10 to police, 10 to fire. So the rest of the city literally is operated off of $4 million, which is amazing for a
Yeah, and that's
municipality of.
that's that's pretty typical. I think,
Yeah,
80 to 85% goes to
yeah,
public safety. Yeah.
yeah, for a municipality of somewhere around 53,000 people within a thriving metropolitan area. That's not a huge budget by any stretch of the imagination. It's a lot of money, but it's not a huge budget by any stretch. So we had to spend taxpayer money wisely. We knew that. That was a philosophy of ours. And but within that, we were able to build without raising taxes, build a brand new 37,000 square foot, $12 million law enforcement facility. And we didn't do it. We didn't raise taxes in doing that. The way we financed it was there was an existing uh, development bond that was extended, so it wasn't a new tax. It was an existing bond that was simply extended, and so a rather creative way of being able to finance that. But we needed a home of our own. We never had a home of our own. We've always been in the basement and closets and shared workspace in Cube City, where you had, the police department was just all spread out all over the place. Shortly after, in 2016, our mayor was appointed. Our new mayor was elected, and we had a big weed bust, 300 pounds of weed. We took it into our property room, and the mayor's having a staff meeting upstairs. Started started smelling started smelling raw weed throughout the entire building because the
Yeah.
ventilation wasn't proper in the in
Yep.
the in the property room. So we're building a new police station. We put an appropriate a OSHA compliant ventilation system, much safer workplace. Just one example of caring for your people. But back to the budget. You can set your priorities with your budget as best you can. We always made a commitment to people, and taking care of our people. We're contract agencies, so the municipality would contract with the FOP. Typically, that'd be about a four year contract, so that the officers would know what they can expect as far as income raises, shifts. Kind of laying that groundwork for what the membership could expect. And that was important for us to do. I think police officers are going to work uh, more efficiently in an environment where they at least know what to expect, know what the ground rules are going to be.
Yeah, and I don't want to get too political here, and this is something probably somewhat unique to Indiana, but Indiana is a right to work state. So, um, during the summer of love and where everybody was frustrated with the police, and we got into these conversations about qualified immunity and that police are being sheltered from criminal wrongdoing. It was just really a time where it just kind of showed the general ignorance about and I don't mean that like, hey, you're an ignorant, um, Jane, like, I don't mean it
Just,
that way. What I
just
mean is like
uninformed.
people just don't know. So,
Yeah, uninformed.
sure we have FOPs that generally are the bargaining agents for, the line officers. But in the end, when you're a right to work state, yeah, you
Yeah.
get what you get. Uh, you know,
But
it,
and the municipality or the agency, whatever it is, has to recognize those bargaining rights.
yeah,
There has to be a recognition there, I think.
yeah,
And with us in Lawrence, there traditionally was. Sometimes that recognition was more robust than at other times.
right.
Some and there
Usually
were
it's just kind of a handshake, a wink, wink, nod, nod, and fortunately
yeah,
for us, I mean, we had our mayor was at one point the president of our FOP, so
yeah,
yeah.
yeah,
So I mean, I just bring that up because it's you know, Indiana is also, most agencies are what they call merit agencies, and there's Indiana merit
yeah.
law that guides hiring, termination, discipline,
Discipline, promotion.
certain levels of discipline and promotion. People
Yeah,
would get frustrated with me, uh, like when they thought I should have terminated an officer, I would get, emails and phone calls and comments from community members telling people, oh, you don't care about the community. If you did, you would have fired this officer, and and then like, but it also, it goes the other way as well. So
right.
anyway, I
Yeah.
digress. I've gotten way off topic here. I always do.
Well, that's all right. And maybe this all ties into the whole wellness and resiliency piece that I think was a hopeful focus of our conversation here. Because I don't know about you, but in my experience, certainly, what we face in law enforcement externally, the calls for service, the tragedies that we have a front row seat to witness, takes its toll, certainly. For me and what I saw, not only for myself, but for our fellow officers, it was what the officers faced from the inside sometimes, from their own agency treating them poorly. That had more effect on them than anything they faced from the outside. I can tell you that's accurate for me. I work for some great, worked with and for some great people, some great chiefs, some great leaders. I also had worked for some really poor ones and ones that were ego driven, more about themselves than the greater good, the common good, and very much in service to themselves. Their lust for power
Do you
far
think
outweighed.
that's do you think that's unique to policing though?
No, it's not. No, it's not. I know it's not.
Yeah.
It's certainly not. But it's an effect that I think a lot of people may not necessarily understand that are outside of law enforcement, even though it may not be unique to law enforcement. I agree with you. I don't think it is. I think that most law enforcement agencies are a paramilitary style organization. Whether that's good or that's not good can be debated, but it's it's the threat that you face from within. Going back to my dad's prophetic words uh, when I was 17 years old, not the threat from the outside that will
Yeah,
that
you know,
will
it's
bother you. And in my
it's
experience, he's absolutely right.
yeah, and that's that's when I teach that wellness class with the new chiefs, that's one of the things that I bring up, right? It's like, when you're in, for those that are maybe not in law enforcement, but for those that are or were, that was the old joke, right? It's like I can deal with the stabbings, the shootings, the robberies, the homicides. That's easy. It's the administrative stress that drives me nuts, right? Like 90% of all stress is administrative related. And So it's like, I asked that question at the beginning, right? And everybody, all the new chiefs are all
Yeah,
raising their, shaking their head. And I'm like, hey, now what do you think's going to change now that you're in the chief's chair? Do you think, uh, 10% of your stress is going to come from the officers, and I don't know, where's the other 90% going to come from? Because it's the same coin, right? It's just a different side. And now when you're a chief, you realize, oh, guess what? The administrative stress never goes away. It's those same interpersonal conflicts and your communication and how, policy, procedure, all these things. Now you're in a position to be able to do something about it. But what you quickly
yeah.
realize is, yeah, you're never going to make everybody happy, and
Indeed.
it's a
And
it's a difficult position to be in.
did you attend training, have the great privilege of attending any training by the world-class gentleman by the name of Bill Westfall?
Yes,
Yeah. So
yes.
Bill's one of my favorite people and certainly a career mentor. But one of the things that he shared that I took into every leadership position I've ever had, sometimes we can get so caught up in doing things right that we fail to do the right thing. And I just saw example after example of that throughout my tenure, my 40-year tenure at the three different agencies that I was directly part of, and training officers from across the country. We can get so caught up in doing things right that we fail to do the right thing. And you know, something I always used to say that people want to think that we operate in a black and white world, and I would say that there are 243 shades of gray between black and white. Very rarely are we operating in the strictly black or the strictly white. And
There's
I'm
not 50
obviously,
shades.
yeah, I'm using metaphors here, but it illustrates the point that I think we need to look at things. I think
Did
the
you
more
catch
we
my
can.
reference? I think my
Oh yeah, I
reference.
got it. Oh, I got it. um, the
But yes, sorry, not
I
to
see
distract you
got
from
me
your point.
completely off track now. Thinking about that 50 Shades. Um, but I think the more we can do from every leadership position, from the first line, from field training officers to sergeants to lieutenants, all the way up to the chief's office, the more that we can filter out and support our people, take care of our people. Our mistakes going to happen, certainly. Let's look at the context of those mistakes. And I'm not saying there shouldn't be accountability, but let's try to identify what the real problem is. And frequently, if an officer does do something that they, with the benefit of hindsight, could have done much better, frequently there are reasons behind that aren't necessarily indicated in that immediate circumstance. Does that make immediate circumstance? Does that make sense the way I'm saying that?
Yo,
Frequently, there's
absolutely.
a
Yeah,
lack
well,
of
you're
sleep. There's a
you're
lack
talking
of
about Bessel van der Kolk. Is I don't know, and maybe we talked about this on our pre-podcast. And for those, I've mentioned this book in the past, and if you haven't read it, every police leader should read a book called The Body Keeps Score, and it's written by Bessel van der Kolk, and it's really about it's and it's not just necessarily the experiences that you have in your professional life, but it's also the experiences that you bring with you from your childhood, unresolved childhood traumas, and experiences that you've had. All of these things, they're an accumulation, and when you get inside, maybe to some, what I guess my interpretation of your point is when you become a police officer, those things don't magically disappear just because now you're carrying a gun and wearing a badge. You bring them with you, and now guess what? Every night when you go out, every day that you go out, that's all you're going to experience
yeah,
is the accumulation of trauma on every person that you deal with. Like their lifetime of trauma is going to get unloaded on you on every call that you go to. And that's a lot.
well,
That's a lot of burden to ask, any individual to carry. And so, yeah, it's
when I
we're
would just
we're
talk
we're
to.
we're a lot better now than we were 20, 25 years
Oh,
ago, but we
oh,
still we
it's
still have a long way to go.
still a long way to go. We're so much better, and there's a lot to potentially unpack there. And man, we can talk about this for the next 3 hours, couldn't we? Um,
Absolutely, at least.
but police officers are human beings and experience the same things that every other person in society experiences. The same trials, tribulations, challenges, the same things that everybody else experiences, and then some. I read recently where your average person will have 4 or 5 traumatic events occur to them in their lifetime. A police officer can have that in one shift. In one
Yeah.
shift,
Yeah,
they
the
can have
data
that.
says up to 100 and on average it's between like 160 and 180. This was the data that's like that the average police officer would experience 160 to 180 traumatic events over the course of their career. There's actually a specific number. It might have been like 168, 172. But I personally thought that number was low.
Yeah,
Um,
I
but
think
it might
that's
just, but
very
it
low.
also just might depend on, the environment in which you're working, right?
The
If you're in
environment,
a,
your agency. I remember one Thanksgiving Day at Frankfurt. I personally had to make 4 death notifications to families, 4 separate incidents, not a combined incident, 4 separate incidents, death notifications to families that were gathering for Thanksgiving. And you do your best to manage that, but you're giving the worst news that a family has ever received on what's supposed to be one of the most joyous days of the year. That's tough stuff. And if we don't kind of process that and find a healthy way to manage that, that can add up over the years, and it's going to manifest in different ways and different people that bring those human aspects. The very human elements that we want our police officers to have. We're not robots. We're not UAVs. We're not drones. We're human beings, and along that, along with that comes a great many positives and a few negatives that need to be managed internally and externally. And I think as leaders, one of the best things that we can do is try to minimize that noise that affects our officers that we don't need to have and filter that out. Do our best that we can to filter that out and to give them a good environment to work in that is as free as it can be anyway. It'll never be completely free, but as free as it can be of those of that noise and support, and do a better job at supporting those ongoing efforts to understand that. I think knowledge is power. And I'll give you, for instance, I think something we don't do a very good job of, we're doing a better job, but there's more work to be done, is emphasizing the importance of sleep within our ranks, within society as a general, but within our ranks. I went for 30 years, 30 straight years where I was on call for one reason or another. As a detective, a public information officer, member of the SWAT team, deputy chief, and then the chief. And as we got busier at our agency, there wasn't a night that would go by that I wasn't woken up multiple times a night, receiving those staff pages of whatever mayhem was occurring, and and there are things we needed to know certainly, but you don't realize what a toll that takes on you until you're not doing it anymore. I didn't realize it until I retired,
and we're now, it only took us an hour to get here.
yeah, right. I tried to get there, tried to get us back there.
Well, that's one of the reasons we wanted to have this call because it's, you know, it's
You see what I did there,
all
Chief?
things that
I
I
just brought
liked
it
it.
right back home,
Very,
right?
very well done, Chief. Well done. Like it's, you don't know what you don't know, right? Until you do. And, we had this conversation, uh, in our pre-podcast call, and it was really more of a question than anything else. And people, I would tell people all the time, like for the first 6 months that I was retired, I didn't feel like I was retired. And I gotta be honest in that some days I still don't feel like I'm retired. I just feel like I've been on like this extended leave. But for the first 6 months, really, it just kind of felt like a long vacation. And because the same thing, right? Like for 25 straight years, I was on call.
Yeah,
And
yeah,
through for one reason or another, 25 years. And where it wasn't until the last really 5 years of my career where and I'll remind me to come back to that, what really made me stop and think about some of these things. And it was working with a life coach, that someone from the outside had to raise that question and really make me think about it. But yeah, like what's the last thing you would do before you go to bed?
yeah. Look at my phone.
Yeah, what's the first thing that you would do when you wake up in the morning?
look at my phone,
Yeah, if you had to take a leak in overnight, what'd you do?
check my phone to make sure I didn't miss anything. 100%
Yeah.
every
Yeah.
time.
And you know, yeah, so sleep disruption is one of the, and for those that have been following long enough, no, it's like, yeah, we run this program. I've call it different things now. We call it now the 4 month Metabolic Reset Project, where we do labs and uh, Gary's agreed to be one of my chief lab rats, where we're going to test him. But I did a pilot earlier this year in Indiana where we tested, we had a group of 30 chiefs participate. We've done it really for about the last decade. We've presented this at National FOP. I presented with Kevin Go-Martin there, and also at the International Association of Chiefs of Police and their wellness symposium. But what we're finding is, like, all of these things, there is, you know, there is evidence to suggest that police stress, which I think we all know, right, is a little bit different, right? We know mortality rates are higher, obesity rates are higher, cardiovascular disease rates are higher. Well, the thing that we've just never really done a good job of is trying to understand, well, what's driving that? What causes that? And so, yeah, well, being on call is one cause. when you
Sure.
when you don't sleep, that's a stressor in and of itself, right? Because
Yep.
regardless if it impacts your sleep or not, like, it does impact the way that you plan your days. Like,
Oh,
it's not
absolutely
just
does.
like, hey, I'm gonna run to hey, let's run up to Chicago for a Cubs game today.
Yeah.
Or let's head down to a Colts game. And, like, even though you're on your day off, it's like, okay, well, okay, if I'm out of town, what are my responsibilities here? So it's like, now I got to call and, coordinate and facilitate and make sure that in my absence, if something happens that I'm responsible for, that there's someone there. So, I mean, it seems like a small thing. It's just kind of a natural part. But generally speaking, cops, you don't get paid extra for that.
No,
No, it's just
no.
just
It's
part of
part.
your duty.
It's part of taking ownership of the responsibilities. You have the
Yeah.
privilege of occupying in that moment. That I can say that for me, and I'm sure you felt the same way. The privilege of occupying those positions, and I was going to own them 100%. And
Yeah.
I would have people that I would designate as my, as whether you're on call detective or especially as a PIO. I took total ownership of that program for us, and I would own that to the point where, yeah, I had somebody who would, if a physical response was needed, they would go there if I was out of state and unavailable. But the phone calls, I remember speaking with people during crisis moments, from a hotel room in Las Vegas, walking down the strip of Las Vegas, and with my toes in the sand on the beaches of Hawaii and everything in between. I fully accepted it. I think that's something that is important to understand. That wasn't something. Those weren't things I was forced to do. I'm guessing the same with you. I wasn't forced to do any of that. I took ownership of the responsibilities that I had, and I owned them wholeheartedly. What I didn't have, though, and what I think we're getting a little better at, still work to do, is educating ourselves and our workforce the about some of the negative aspects or the negative impacts that some of that can have, and the importance of managing that a little better, or a lot better in some cases. And I know that I never really understood the importance of sleep and of proper nutrition, of maintaining appropriate physical fitness. I always felt like I was a fairly, always a lifelong larger person, but I could do the job. And we all have our attributes, we all have our things we need to work on, right? And um, but towards the end of my career, I didn't manage that as well as I should have or could have. I tell everybody this: we built our new police station. We put a state of the art gym in the basement of it. That gym was 55 steps, exactly 55 steps from my office. I darkened the doors of it to give a tour. The only time I darkened the doors of that gym was when I was giving a tour. I don't say that proudly, and I should have been down there every single day. But the bottom line is, I didn't. I wasn't. It wasn't a priority for me. And it sounds cliche, but it's true. You can't pour from an empty cup. And once it caught up with me, it caught up in a hurry. And when your cardiologist looks at you and says, if you don't reduce and manage your stress better, you're going to wind up a permanent resident here. You know that gets your attention, and it certainly
What do
gave
you
a
think of
renewed focus for me to for us to do better, and for me to do better personally, and then for us as a profession to do better.
and I appreciate that candidness and what because and I'll be honest, like I come from the opposite end of the spectrum where I got into fitness and nutrition early in my career, and I probably was a little less compassionate than I should have been, in terms of understanding, hey, not everybody approaches this the same way. Um, but I'm always curious about this too because in the program that we're doing now, right? We've had amazing success stories, and uh, we we use this police panel. We look at 7 lines of data, but primarily what we're looking at is what we call your LPIR score, your lipoprotein insulin resistance score, and it's really a marker of metabolic health and inflammation. So if you're metabolic health, if you're if you're insulin resistant, then you have inflammation in your body and you have metabolic dysfunction. Now, what's driving that can be a little bit different for everybody, but for police officers, what we're finding is between 70 and 80% of the people that we test are insulin resistant and they don't know it. They don't even know what insulin resistance
Yeah,
is.
yeah,
And um, and it's a combination of all these things: a lack of movement, accumulated stress, poor sleep, you know, nutritional interventions that we try or don't try. Some help, some don't, and we're not using the right information and we're not capturing the right data to steer us in the direction that we need to go. And so
mhm,
that's ultimately where we're at. But but leaders in particular, the reason I went to chiefs first, I did this for my whole agency, but I offered it to them. I didn't have it, I didn't mandate it, and I had over 50% take me up on getting the test. But chiefs, like, and I bring this up in the trainings that I do, right? It's we're very servant minded, very servant leadership oriented. And that's kind of like that's the way a lot of us cut our teeth, especially like in the tactical realm and stuff like that, right?
yeah,
You don't ask someone to do something that you're not willing or haven't done yourself. And
absolutely.
we tend to put everybody else first, we put ourselves last. And so even though you had that brand new gym 55 steps away, you know, I mean, I'm curious, what is it that kept you from going in there?
Myself, nobody else. My perception that the job required me to give and give and give and give and not take, that would have felt incredibly selfish to me to go down and do that, even though with the benefit of hindsight, I know the exact opposite is true. I know that now, but in the moment, in those times, that would have felt incredibly selfish. That would have felt like me taking me time and time away from investing in the agency and investing in our people. And right or wrong, that was my mindset. And it's an honorable mindset, I think. But again, you can't pour from an empty cup, and that might work right up until it doesn't. And
Yeah.
and when you crash hard. And like I said, I'm not saying this proudly, but it's honest. That was my mindset. Yeah, definitely adhered to the or tried to adhere to the servant leadership model. Um, give until you can't give anymore, and then give a little more. And I cared. And that's a for me that was a result of caring. I truly cared about our people, about our agency, about our department. I probably cared more about them than I cared about myself. And and I don't think that's an uncommon viewpoint within our ranks, within our profession. But thankfully, I think that's changing. And honestly, I think our younger generations of officers are kind of leading the way in that. Even though we might kind of
No, they
give
they
our
they they certainly have the the balance and the expectations, I think, are in the right place. And it doesn't, and, sadly, it's just not well received sometimes because,
Yeah. Yeah.
and I will say there is a caveat to that, right? And, um, you, there, sh it's, they shouldn't have to fight for the, I think, the benefit of protecting their health and the wellness of not just themselves but their family. At the same time, it's when you're running an organization with a lot of people, you also have to have systems in place that protect against those that abuse it, because you have abusers in every agency. And so even though when you want to do the right thing for everybody, you have to set up rules that create fairness for the organization, which again, I my saying is, you got to lead yourself before you can lead others. If
Yeah.
you can't manage yourself, what makes you think that you can manage the expectations or other people? I mean, it's so it seems counterintuitive, um, but it's not. One of my previous guests on the podcast, right, wrote the book Lead Yourself First, and
Yeah.
we had these conversations, and what you're saying is so true. And fortunately for you, you're in a position now, even though you're retired, like you're in a position where you can change your destiny and your course. But the number
Absolutely.
one killer of cops is cardiovascular disease. It's
Yeah.
not assault. It's not car accidents.
Yeah.
It's cardiovascular disease, and it's 25 times that greater. You're 25 times more likely to die from a cardiovascular related event than you are from anything else. And then the number two killer is suicide. So
Yeah.
it
For
which
shame.
has a
For shame that is.
which now in the last few years we know this now has a very strong metabolic connection. Like if you are metabolically unwell, you're more likely to have experiences with anxiety, with depression.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, uh,
Well,
we want to change this perception that, hey, if I go into the gym and see the chief in there working out, it's, oh, look at that, admin guy, he gets to go work out where I'm working the street. I don't get a chance to go work out, look at it. And that's what we do. That's what we do inside of police departments. We freaking literally eat our own inside those walls. Like,
yeah.
man, our patrol officers and our detectives used to go back and forth, because, who's
Oh,
gonna work,
indeed.
who's gonna run my calls while I'm in the gym working out? Like, you don't have to worry about that. And it's a legitimate gripe, right? But there also has to be an understanding that, okay, well, there are ways to work through this and around this, and there are ways to build this into contracts and everything else
Yeah.
where
Exactly.
we can make it work. But it all starts with the understanding that, we want to begin with the end in mind. And the end is when we retire, we want to bankrupt that pension fund. We want to go on and live long, happy, successful lives outside of policing and not
Absolutely.
give everything and leave it all on the deck there at the PD and then have nothing left on the back end. And I'll say this is my last rant, and this is where I get really frustrated is because I chaired our legislative committee for our Chiefs Association for years. I chaired our wellness committee, very little participation in either one of those committees. Yet in Indiana has this Republican supermajority right now, and this is coming from a lifelong Republican. I go down and we need pension reform. Why? Well, because our pensions are at poverty level, and we don't have health insurance, and we're taking the very best of our first responders and we're wringing them dry, and then we're sending them out the door into retirement with very little pay and no health care benefits.
Yeah.
And everyone backs the blue until it's time to start writing those checks, and like, oh well, maybe we should, maybe when this person is, when we are sending them out the door, insulin resistant, with cardiovascular disease, with high levels of stress, with sleep, with permanent sleep disruption, and now they've got to go fend for themselves. Yeah, it fucking pisses me off. And you know, we got to make this change. So I'm off my soapbox. I'm so glad that you're going to do our lab test, because we're going to have an episode. We're going to have part two of this episode. We're going to run Gary through our metabolic reset program, and then we're going to come back and talk about it on after your 4 or 5 months into the program. But until then, like here is the discussion, right? And here is, the elephant in the room is, we want to do the best by our officers, but as leaders, that often means like you have to make room for yourself, and you have to give yourself some grace, and you have to invest in yourself. And it's not selfish for you to spend some time in the gym. It's not selfish for you to go to a retreat with other chiefs, to go to a leadership um, school, to go to a class where, the same reason we send our officers to breacher school, firearms instructors to, their schools. Like, there's a time and place for all this stuff. And, at the end of that, the common connector to all these things is it goes back to the budget, and, where the resources coming from. So in our communities, if we, and we do have tremendous, particularly in Indiana, we have tremendous community support for our police departments. But I just don't think most people realize that we are
Indeed.
way underfunded,
Indeed.
because we could work 10-hour shifts if we added 30% to our budget.
Right.
Um, but then we're asking other citizens to give up their hard-earned tax dollars for our first responders. So what are we going to give in return, right?
Right. Yeah. A lot to consider there, a lot to unpack. Uh, Love your, absolutely grateful and love your commitment and your investment in all of this. And I'm excited about participating in the program. I can tell you this: since I retired, I've lost 75 pounds, which is a good start. I have a long way to go. And
Congratulations, brother.
think I told
Congratulations.
you. I appreciate that. I think I told you in our pre-conversation that you know I plateaued kind of at that 75. Lost the first 30, lost the first 60, 65, 70, 75, kind of plateaued there. And I think participating in this program is going to help me push through that. And I will say the overall of a lot of this, knowledge is power, right? Again, it sounds so cliche, but it's true, man. Um, educating our people, our workforce, our officers, our civilian staff, having these holistic wellness programs that we're investing in, and it needs to go beyond check of the box. And we need to truly invest. And in my mind, that process does start at the top with the chief, and establishing that trust. I think, and I don't think that can be underestimated. Is having the trust of the people that are in the leadership positions cannot be overstated. And that whatever data is collected, whatever investments are made, are not going to be used against an officer. I know every agency is kind of socialized a little bit differently, but I look at our colleagues to the north here with the Fishers Police Department and their chief up there, who, in my respectful opinion, is doing a great job. And they've kind of been one of the agencies that have somewhat led the way in investing in wellness and resiliency for their people and their officers. And we modeled our program that we invested in Lawrence after theirs. Now, our two agencies have been socialized over the years significantly differently, but nonetheless, the intent in the investment is very similar, and at least giving, I call them off ramps on another podcast I was on, offering our officers and our personnel off ramps, that if they want to take that off ramp to be able to get off of that wheel or that roller coaster, they have those off ramps at their disposal. Does that metaphor make sense to you,
Oh
Chief?
yeah, yeah, I love it.
Yeah,
Yep.
yeah. Offer those off ramps, and you never know. You plant that seed,
It's
you
a
offer
fork
those
in the road, right?
opportunities.
It's
It's a
you have
fork
an
in the
option.
road. Yeah, and you might have a multitude of options. You might have a menu of options. and one option might sing to your soul that may not sing to my soul. So we offer those variety of options, and we would do that on the physical side, but
That in the book.
until quite recently, we just started investing in that in the emotional and the psychological wellness side, and so I think those investments are important. What you're talking about with the metabolic factors and metabolic indicators, man, that's information that is critical to know. I did some of that before I started on my weight loss journey. Maybe some different markers there, but nonetheless, it was just fascinating to learn those and to understand the impact those have on our human systems. And I think we can attack it from that angle, from a data angle, from the mental, emotional, psychological angle. I think we're on the right track there. And yeah, at the end of it, I agree with you. My intent is to draw every retirement check that I have coming to me for a very, very, very long time. I have more to do now that I'm retired. People ask me, "What do you do with your day?" Man, I feel like I'm busier now than I was on the job, and that sounds kind of funny because we were real busy, when we were working, but working full time. But I stay very busy now, but the focus has shifted to me. This is me time now. And even as I sit here and say that, Chief, there's still a part of me inside that feels selfish about it. But you know what? I'm at much more equilibrium with that now than I was towards the latter part of my service career. And I think people like you who got that earlier on, I admire that and respect that. And then your continuing investment in caring about our people, caring about our officers, our staffs, our civilian staff, our telecommunicators, our people working in the jails and prisons and on and on. The whole spectrum of public safety. Much progress has been made. There's still more progress to make, and people like you are leading the way in that. And
You know,
I'm very grateful for that.
well, no, I appreciate that. And here's, but it's not easy. I'll be honest. Like, you take a lot of arrows when you do stuff like that. And, but that's true in any endeavor, right? Like anytime you're in a position like that, you just have, like you just have to understand that, it doesn't mean that you can't get frustrated from time to time. So having good support networks around you can really help, mitigate some of that. But the, the I'm going to show. There was an expert, like when I was mentioned earlier, lead yourself first. Like the Michael Irwin, who was he's an Army officer, retired Army officer. Actually, I think he's still active in the reserves. But he wrote this book. Who the forward was by Jim Collins. And I'll be honest, that's one of the reasons I told him. That's one of the reasons that I picked up the book because the book Good to Great was one of my favorite. It probably is my favorite management leadership book that
Yeah,
that's ever been written. I think there's a lot of really good ones, but that one
that's
really
a good one.
changed the way I thought about a lot of things. But Mike is also the founder of Team Red, White, and Blue, that
Mm,
organization. And, his story,
yeah,
what I didn't know about him is like, when I just cold contacted him, reached out to, because I think I read this book maybe in like 2017 or 18. Um, and, it really, this book really had a huge impact on me and the way I kind of thought about, um, my own, like the way I was managing myself in a lot of ways, even though I'd already come from a strong, nutrition and fitness background. Um, there's a complete other side of the house, right? Of health, right? Being the mental, emotional, and spiritual side of the house, and they're all interconnected, and they're all
indeed.
they're all interrelated. But as a police leader, right? It's like what if we make our decisions on emotion, we're not going to last very long, right?
Right.
Um, if we only make our decisions on data, well, likewise, right? We're probably not going to last very long. So there's really an art of understanding, like, where I think where management and leadership, because as a chief, you have to do both. Uh, it lies in that, in that ability to, you have to find the best information that you can find. And when you get your hands on the best information, and then you have to find the best resources and the best experts, internally and externally, our people are our biggest and best asset. You have to
Absolutely.
learn to tap into them, and you have to learn to feed them, but they also have to learn how to manage themselves as well. um, it becomes this amalgamation of these different things.
Yeah.
But at the bottom, at the end of it, no, I've tried a million different things when it comes to wellness. Um, but I always come back to the labs because, and that's why we started that program, which has led to a startup company called Saga Health, where we're bringing this to police departments. Is you got to have data, and the blood does not lie.
Yeah.
We use blood at crime scenes. We capture DNA. It tells a story. It gives us identity. It gives us information. And so when we look at labs, we have to look at it the same way. We got to put on our investigator's hat, and we have to say, okay, what is my blood telling me about my health
Yeah.
today? Like,
And man, I think that's key. And I think information and education and enlightenment, hopefully leading to enlightenment, saturate, incubate, and illuminate, right? That's those things are key. And people like you and others, and trying to do my part here too, and shifting that mindset, and investing in our people and providing them opportunities for education, for understanding what's going on with themselves. Man, I think that's huge. What you're doing is a big deal, and you probably don't think that it is, but in my mind it is. And providing our people with information they need that is going to help them improve their short, mid, and long term health, and not necessarily be that person that's looking back at something with a benefit of hindsight, going, "Oh, sure could have done that differently and better." You know, first person have the hand in the air to say that, to admit that. And and I think doing better by our people, and offering them opportunities to learn and for to have that information. Uh, and I think that's one of the first steps in moving things forward. And hopefully, great media agencies are ramping on to this. And I know a lot of agencies are making investments. I love the book references. I'm a big reader also. I've listened to a lot of books on audio now, but I still like to sit down with that printed book in hand and still read those. And I
yeah.
think I've done that throughout my career. I've always been a reader. I will sit there like Monday Night Football last night. Yeah, I've got it on in the background, but most of the time I'm going to be sitting there with a book in my hand or doing something that
I
hopefully is
used to be able to do
educational, and,
that.
and
I
edifying,
used
edifying myself.
Yeah, I used to be able to do that on Monday Night Football. I would mute the TV and sit there and read and pop up. But now, thanks to the Manning brothers on ESPN2,
Right?
now I can't. Like, it's like that is so entertaining to watch. I'm like, this is the freaking best way to ever watch a football game.
Yeah, they're quite
And
a pair, aren't they?
so yeah, and and I know there are people that are doing this, but all right, so we'll have to tie that into remind me to come back to Lawrence PD doing police live PD.
Yeah.
But before I get off the rails, I want there's another thing I wanted to come back to because we're coming up on our 90 minutes already here, so I want to
Yes, we are.
start bring this baby into the barn. But a few years before I retired, I went through if you're if you're familiar, he's not very well known in policing circles, but Stephen Kotler, he's one of the experts now on like flow science,
Flow. Yeah,
and
yeah. I'm very
there's
familiar.
you know Mikhail
Uh-huh.
Csikszentmihalyi is probably the father of flow psychology, and a lot of Kotler's work flows from that. But he wrote a
Yep.
book that I read years ago called The Rise of Superman, and it was really one of the more impactful books that I've read because and for those that have not read it, I would strongly encourage you to pick it up because it's kind of like a dip into the psyche and just like the human spirit, like what what makes progress possible, like it's particularly when it comes to human performance. and he was an avid skier, and he was a traveling journalist, and he
So don't lose your thought. We gotta hit pause for a minute.
okay, all right.
Sorry,
I'm
I know
gonna
you're right
I'm
in the
gonna
middle of.
hit pause.
All right.
Yeah. So, in Kotler's work, what he really what he was talking about is how, like, if a skateboarder goes from being able to do like a 360 to a 540 to a 920 to a 1080, like we
Hmm.
keep pushing the bounds and the boundaries about what we think is possible. And so I went through, he had a program for a while, it was called Zero to Dangerous. So I put myself through this program because I wanted to understand, like, how, like, because there's a lot of correlation to policing there. Like, how do we get our officers into a flow state?
Right.
How do we get ourselves into that state? And, without getting into the science and all that, but anyway, so there's a classroom portion of that class, but then there was also a portion of that class that required me to work with a PhD level coach, like life coach. And like I did not want to do that part of the program. I've talked about this a few times. Like I really did not want to do that. I'm like, oh, I don't want to work with somebody I don't know. Right. And like that was the cop mentality in me, right? Like I can figure this out for myself. I don't need to
Right.
ask for help. Like just give me the book, just give me the information. I'll read it, I'll dissect it, and I'll take what I want from it and go and so I really kind of dreaded that part of the program, but in order to complete it, you had to do it. So I get on this call, and there was 11 coaches to pick from, and there was one that had done some work with uh, Major League Baseball players, professional football players, but he also, I saw in there, had worked with FBI HRT
Ah,
members. And so I was like, okay, this guy, like, and nobody else had even touched like the military or public safety. So I was like, all right, I'll choose this guy because he at least has some idea. And yeah, I get on that call. Our first call was at 7 in the morning, so I was on ready to go. And we kind of spent 2 or 3 minutes on some of the basic pleasantries, and then he just got right down to business. And he's like, "Hey, look, um, and my time is very valuable, and I know your time is very valuable. So let's get to work." And like, I don't, I'm not here to, you know, have just shoot the shit with you for an hour. Let's get to it. And so immediately I kind of appreciated that. But he just, we got into the very first session, the very first 30 minutes. It was really like he was like, tell me about your day, tell me about a typical day, what does it look like for you? And that was kind of like taking a step back, and he got very down into the weeds about asking, okay, why'd you do that? Why do you do that? Like what leads you to that? Why'd you make that decision? And the first assignment that I had, because it was 2 weeks between sessions, was really about, okay, now really think about what you're doing during your day. What gives you good energy? What pulls from your energy? What parts of the day you feeling at your best? What parts of the day are you feeling low energy? But really, the big takeaway from the first one was he had me change my morning routine, like what I did first thing in the morning, because like we talked about at the beginning, first thing I was doing was picking up my phone. Well, why? Well, and this is oftentimes before I even got up to go to the bathroom, right?
sure.
It was look at your phone and see what I missed overnight. Well, what happens when you do that? Well, you see what you missed overnight. It could be an emergency, it could not be an emergency, but you might, let's just say you ended your day the day before with the way I think everybody should end their day, right? Is write down a few things that you got accomplished, and then write down the three most important things you got to get done the next day. And so you have a plan. And so then you can just kind of put that on the shelf. So when you go home, you're not thinking about work or about what you need to do. You already know what you need to get done at work. Well, what happens when you look at the phone and you see something that happened? Well, now your day is completely derailed. And so now you're not being proactive, you're being reactive. And sure, there's always going to be things that force you to be reactive in this profession, because things are always evolving. But that's what we have teams for. That's what we have trusted leaders for inside of our organizations, because and that's why they have teams that they work with. And that, a lot of times that's why I tell people, you come from a smaller agency, that actually makes it more difficult.
Yeah,
Sometimes we think
some ways.
everything's got its challenge. So yeah, my first day, or that I changed the first hour of my day based on that one conversation where no phone. Like, what's going to change? There are a few people um, that had, the push through and my notifications that were, if they actually called me, my phone would ring. And there are settings that you can do that in your phone, even when you have it silenced. So for your
Absolutely.
emergency people, like, so if it's a true emergency, someone's going to be able to get a hold of me. But outside of that, anything can wait an hour or 2 hours. And so, yeah, that first hour was, yeah, get up, use the restroom. Then I spend 10 to 15 minutes stretching. Some days it's 10 minutes, some days it's 20 minutes, because some days I'm a little bit tighter than others. And then it's, you can see it right back here. If I lean this way, maybe if I roll back, and it's still here, right? Is you can see my meditation chair back here.
Yes.
10 to 15 minutes there. And then I have several books there. Like I read Seneca, I read Marcus Aurelius. I like the Stoics, but I'm on
Same. Same.
Brian Johnson's book, Arete, is there. That's a great one because it's just got little, one page, uh, the best takes from some of the best and best thinkers out there. It's great. You can sit there. So yeah, you read for 10 minutes, and then you look at your phone. Like, so you spend that 45 minutes to an hour with yourself. If that means you need to get up a little bit earlier, so depending on what your life situation is with spouse working, kids going to school, all those different things that you're managing, you have to find that time, because now we're setting the day up right where we control our day, even when things happen that are unexpected or that take us off what our planned course was. We're still managing it and we're still in control. And yeah, and so there's a pre-bed routine. So it was like, I couldn't wait. I could not wait for the next session with that coach.
That's
So
cool.
four
Yeah.
sessions, they went like that. And it just, the lesson there was, is like, sometimes the things that we fear and we resist the most, like why isn't it? Why won't I take those 55 steps, right?
Mm,
Why do I drive
indeed.
through McDonald's when I know that there's a salad sitting in my fridge at home, or uh, there's anytime that you're having these, and when you give yourself that a little bit of grace like that, and you give yourself a little bit of time, what it allows you to do is start to gain some perspective,
Yeah.
um, and if you get a little bit more agency is the word, right? But a little bit more control over what you're doing, a little bit more discipline. So um
Well,
yeah,
good for
it's
you.
a long way of saying, there's a there's a lot of science behind this. It's not
Hmm.
voodoo. um
Hmm.
it's there is, the mind is a very, very powerful thing, and where it
Indeed.
goes, you follow.
Very much so. And yeah, I've had the good opportunity to have been mentored by a former high level Navy SEAL friend of mine, and one of his biggest things, the mind controls the body doesn't control the mind. The two should be working in harmony, and sometimes you try to embody that. Sometimes I haven't. Just speaking strictly for me. So,
Well,
um,
you're not alone in that. I mean, we all suffer, the same fates in one form or another, right? Like,
but
we can be our own worst enemies.
we can. But I think the key to that is learning from it and the willingness to be able to share that back with others, which I hear what I hear you doing and saying, and I am invested in doing exactly the same. So So I think, like you said, kind of land the plane here a little bit. Look forward to participating in the study. Look forward to seeing what those results are and applying those. And I think a big thing here too is what I hear or what I'm taking away from you. I've tried to apply the same thing: is never stop learning, never stop applying, never stop educating yourself and learning from these outside resources, be it they law enforcement related or not. Some of the best things that I've learned from others or people that were not within law enforcement, that were from the outside. And yeah, we do kind of have a tendency to have somewhat of a closed society. And I think that many of us who hopefully have had pretty successful careers, during the career and post career, have done exactly that. I think there are some common denominators there, and then we've seen some of our colleagues that have struggled with that over the years, and I think there are some common denominators there also, but that's probably for a second podcast.
Yeah. So when you think about like the way that you manage a day while you were working compared to the way that you manage your day now, obviously we like there is a stress that you feel when you're working that you don't necessarily even understand that you're carrying until you're not carrying it anymore.
One
And
million
it
percent.
and it's the way I kind of liken it is like, if you ever like I ruck, that's one of the things I do to, stay in shape. And on a day where I don't carry the ruck, it's like, wow, this is, you know, I feel light on my feet,
Right,
as
right.
compared to the days when I've got 45 pounds on my back, like, I feel every step. Um, but the longer you carry it and, the more you carry, you can build resilience, but you also realize that there are times when you need to lighten the load a little bit. So,
Yeah,
um, what we're going to work on here for the next 4 to 5 months is we're getting the labs. We're going to look at 7 lines of data. Particularly, we're going to be looking at your LPIR score, your insulin resistance score, and we're going to see where you're at there. We're going to look at your HbA1c, which is hemoglobin A1c, which is it's a inflammatory marker, glyc A. We're going to look at the
yep.
particle count, which is just a better LDLP, which is just, and again, I'm not a doctor, right? So, but I do work with doctors in this program. So, you know, it's I've been looking at enough of these for long enough where, I certainly never prescribe anything, I just share my journey. I share what has worked. I share what has worked with others, but we're going to share all of that with you. We're going to share all of our teaching materials with you. And I think,
Well, it
I
tells a
think,
story, doesn't it? That the
yeah,
data tells a story, the markers tell a story, and gives you information to work with. How you decide to apply it and work with it from there is up to you. But the key is, I think, getting that information and the willingness to do something with it. And
you don't send 10 patrol officers into an area of your city where there's no crime and no complaints,
indeed,
right? They may
indeed,
want to drive there on their own,
right, right,
because, it's a lot less stressful in that area, but that's not where we need them,
right.
right? And so that's, that's the discomfort part of the data. Like you got to see it. Once
Yeah.
now we can formulate a plan
Now we can do something
for
with it.
what we're going to do. And then the feedback that we get every day and the feedback that we get from the labs, it's the same thing that we would do for any, you know, data-driven initiative. We
Yeah,
see what the impact is. We make a decision, we see what the impact is, we evaluate, we reassess, and we move forward. We build on what works, we eliminate what doesn't work. And when it comes to health and fitness, I'm a big CrossFit guy, everyone knows that. I uh, owned a CrossFit gym for years, and I'm a firm believer in the methodology, but I'm also a firm believer that it's not, it's just not for everybody. So you got to find what does work
yeah.
for
Find what
you,
does work for you. Yep.
and that's what we're going to do. We're going to find what works, and then we're going to double
Well,
down, and then we're going to
and I've
double
done.
down, and we're going to double down.
Amen. I know I've done a lot of that work. Post retirement, I should have been doing it beforehand, but we can't change what we didn't do back then, but we can learn from it and apply it moving forward, right? And the day that I retired, January 2nd of 24, I joined a gym and regularly go there. I do something every day, whether it's walking or lifting or do something every day, and I think just refocusing on that. I may not be the hit CrossFitter that you are, but I do things that work for me, and it's made a huge difference. I can just tell you, it's just made a huge difference. I mean, there was a time there that even some basic things were somewhat of a challenge, and of course you can make every excuse in the world as to why that is. And when you don't take care of yourself as well as you should, your body starts to break down. That's going to happen.
Well,
But anyway,
unless you have a physical limitation, everybody needs to move. Like
yeah,
you may
yeah,
not
for
want to,
sure.
but you need to, everyone needs to move every day. We need to be
What?
very intentional about what we put into our body. We have to understand the why behind
Absolutely.
what we put in there. We in our metabolic reset group, we really focus on a therapeutic ketogenic style of nutrition plan because we have seen it.
Yep.
It's one of the most effective ways to reverse insulin resistance. So that's why we use it. I'm not saying people
But
have to, have to do it, or there's other ways to skin the cat,
oh,
but this
but it
is what
makes
we know
sense.
works.
But you can't outlift, outrun, outwalk, outwork a poor diet, right? Now, I'm saying this with the benefit of hindsight because I'm that guy that when I joined the gym and was going there regularly for almost a year, like, man, I feel better, but I'm not seeing the difference on the scale, you know? Well, duh, because I hadn't changed my eating habits at all. Once I started shifting those eating habits and eating smarter and better, making wiser choices, that's when the 30, 60, 70, 75 started coming off. And once you see that progress, it starts to become synergistic. It's like, hey, I kind of like this. Especially about 50 for me anyway. You start getting those compliments. Hey, you're looking good, man.
A
You know,
little bit of
and
narcissism goes a long way,
well,
Gary.
you try not to be that guy, but we
Oh
all
no,
have
no, a little bit is good.
we all have a little bit of ego to us. We try to keep that in check, but we all have a little bit of ego to us, and you do appreciate that positive feedback from the people that are sincere from. And anyway, something as simple as I see you're wearing one too, but wearing these biometric bands,
Yep.
or biometric device on your fingers or whatever,
Yeah,
something as
more to
simple as
come.
that.
I've got a Whoop, and I'm wearing an Aura. My wife has worn an Aura ring for years. Been having
Yeah,
some conversations with some folks from Aura, so um, we got some exciting things in the works, and I'm really looking forward to to getting the results out and sharing what we're doing with other police leaders and other police departments. So you can
yeah. Hopefully, this case study
hopefully
will.
we can help you help your people, and we know it's working. All right,
All right. Look forward to the
let's
journey.
wrap this baby up now. Like this is what I do with books, right? So when I get books, I have a highlighter with a post-it tab on it, but damn, post-it did away with those things, so I always have to try to find them wherever I can.
Right.
I am now trying to. I'm trying. I did buy a new Kindle that I've got my little note taker on there. I'm trying to save trees as I go because I've got a lot of books. But
Yeah.
um,
Same.
yeah. Anyway, strong. There was some passages in there, but if I read those, it's going to lead to another 30 minutes. So Gary, thanks for
All right.
spending some of your valuable time with us today. I've really enjoyed this. We kind of got off on some tangents, but it happens. It happens every single time. But when we come back, we're so just so everyone knows, we're going to come back after Gary has run himself through the metabolic reset, and we'll talk about what he did, why he did it, why we recommend it, and we'll just have to see from there. And if you're curious, you can go back and listen to the Chad Dick episode. Chad was one of our Indiana Metabolic Reset participants who has the current. Actually, you know what? His record may have been broken, but he set the record on insulin resistance reversal. Took his LPIR score from a 72 down to a 10,
Wow.
and we shared that on the podcast. Pretty
Nice.
amazing.
Bravo. Bravo to him.
Pretty amazing. And And you mentioned something earlier, hey, the weight's not coming off. What I've been telling people for over a decade now is, scales are useful, but they're just one piece of equipment. They give you one data point, how much something weighs. It doesn't tell you how much, doesn't tell you how you feel, doesn't tell you what your energy levels are. It just only tells you, it doesn't tell you what your performance was in the gym. It just tells you, what your weight is. And that combined with other metrics can be useful, but in and of itself, it's just one thing. So, um, that's why we dip under the hood, we get into the blood, and we have some metrics that we look at every single day that can help steer, you know, put the sail up on the ship, get the rudder, get the navigation going, and get to the destination that we're of our choosing. So,
I like
anything you
it.
want to
Looking
share
forward to it.
before we sign off?
No, just thank you. Looking forward to the journey, continuing the journey, and hopefully sharing something that we learned here that others can benefit from.
Right on, brother. Appreciate it. And we'll just have to save those live TV, live cop TV stories for the next episode.
That'll be the next episode. Give us a good thing to talk about.
All right. Till our
All
next
right.
episode will be 1042.